Imagine two sisters, not only sharing the same home, not only sharing secrets, but sharing the very same husband. This is not a fictional story. This is the real-life scandal of the Calderón sisters from Asturias, Spain, in 1938. A story that produced one of the most endogamous lineages history has ever seen. Was this about love, survival, or obsession? Let's uncover the disturbing reality. Why would two sisters choose to marry the very same man, especially in a society where religion ruled every household and tradition dictated every step of life? To understand the Calderón sisters' shocking decision, we must first step back into Spain in 1938, a nation scarred by the brutality of the Civil War, where Asturias stood as one of its most conservative and poverty-stricken regions. Picture the atmosphere: villages bound by silence, families crushed under the weight of hunger, and a Catholic Church holding immense authority over morality and marriage. In such a setting, women had almost no voice in their futures. Their choices were not their own. They were shaped by their fathers, by the Church, and by the relentless pressure of survival. The Civil War had left Asturias devastated, its economy shattered. Families struggled to hold on to land and property, fearing loss of inheritance and social standing. In this fragile world, marriage was not about romance. It was about survival, about securing resources, and about preserving family honor. For women like the Calderón sisters, love was a luxury they could not afford. Instead, their worth was measured by their ability to maintain their family stability. And so, when faced with limited prospects and the fear of losing everything they chose, or perhaps were forced into something society would call scandalous, sharing a husband, it is important to remember that their story did not unfold in a modern world of freedom and self-expression. No, this was a time when even whispering about such an arrangement could bring public shame or religious condemnation. Yet, within their private world, the Calderón sisters made a pact that defied social and moral codes. Was it an act of desperation, driven by the fear of poverty? Was it a calculated decision to protect inheritance? Or was it, in some twisted way, a reflection of loyalty between the two sisters? Here lies the haunting question for us today. Did the Calderón sisters freely choose this path, embracing the scandal for the sake of family unity? Or were they silent victims, product of a rigid culture and a time when women's voices were silenced? Their decision, born in 1938 Asturias, forces us to confront not just their story, but the dark reality of how society, tradition, and survival can dictate the most intimate choices of human life. Point two sisters. One husband. A pact so unthinkable that even in their tiny, tradition-bound village, whispers of scandal could never be silenced. But why would the Calderón sisters agree to something so dangerous, so socially forbidden? To the outside world, it looked like sin disguised as marriage. Yet inside the walls of their home, it was a calculated choice, an arrangement that blurred every boundary of family, morality, and identity. Historians today call endogamy taken to the extreme. Normally, endogamy meant marrying within your community or family line. Cousins marrying cousins to protect land or property. But this was different. This was two sisters making a pact to share not only the same roof, not only the same bloodline, but the same husband. They weren't just breaking social rules. They were rewriting them entirely. To the Church, it was blasphemy. To the village, it was an open wound no one dared to expose. But to the Calderóns, it was survival, and perhaps an unspoken loyalty between the sisters themselves. Think about the children born from this strange arrangement. To the outside world, they were siblings. Yet biologically, they were cousins. A boy would grow up calling two women mother, while never knowing which of them gave him life. A girl might find herself in a confusing position of realizing her playmate was both her sister and her cousin. What kind of psychological mark would that leave on a child? Imagine growing up without clear lines of identity, caught between labels that never fully fit. And what of the sisters themselves? Did they compete for their husband's affection behind closed doors, or did they accept their roles as co-wives in silence? Did jealousy burn quietly between them, or did they hold fast to the pact that bound them tighter than marriage vows ever could? We can only speculate, but the silence of history leaves behind a trail of questions more haunting than answers. This triangle of survival stands as one of the most bizarre family structures in modern history. It challenges us to ask, how far can bloodlines bend before they break? And more disturbingly, can children ever feel secure in their identities when their very existence is born from a pact that defies both morality and nature? What happens when an entire village knows a secret too big to ignore, but chooses silence instead? In Asturias, where gossip traveled faster than the church bells on Sunday, everyone knew about the Calderón Sisters and their shocking arrangement. People whispered in narrow streets, women lowered their voices at the market, and men exchanged glances at the tavern. Yet, when it came to speaking openly, the village froze. It was a scandal too dark, too dangerous, and perhaps too close to home. The Calderón household stood like a fortress of secrecy. Behind its doors, two sisters lived as co-wives, raising children whose identities blurred the lines between cousins and siblings. The villagers pretended not to see, but their silence was deafening. Religious leaders condemned such sins in fiery sermons, warning that God's wrath would strike down those who defied his laws. But when it came to confronting the family directly, no priest, no neighbor, no authority dared step forward. Why? Because poverty, tradition, and fear often weigh heavier than morality. To accuse the Calderóns was to tear open a wound the entire community wanted to keep hidden. Sociologists today call this phenomenon collective silence, the unspoken agreement of society to look away from what is too disruptive, too taboo, or too dangerous to address. In Asturias of 1938, this silence was not cowardice. It was survival. Villagers were already crushed under the weight of war, hunger, and religious authority. To expose the Calderón sisters would not just bring shame to one family. It could ignite conflict in a community too fragile to withstand another fracture. But imagine the psychological toll on those living with the secret. Children growing up hearing whispers they could not fully understand. Women carrying shame like a shadow that followed them even in prayer. Men pretending they did not notice what was happening next door. An entire village living in complicity, haunted by the choice to say nothing. And so, we must ask ourselves, if you were part of that community, would you have spoken out, risking the wrath of the church and the anger of your neighbors? Or would you have stayed silent, convincing yourself that looking away was safer? For you, for your family, for everyone? What happens when one man fathers children with not just one sister, but two, generation after generation? The Calderón story did not end with whispers of scandal hidden behind village walls. Instead, it grew roots, stretching forward into one of the most endogamous lineages ever documented in Spain. Endogamy, the practice of keeping marriages and relationships strictly within a closed circle, was taken to a level so extreme that it reshaped both the family's biology and its legacy. With each new birth, the Calderón children carried the weight of genetic overlap. Their bloodlines, instead of expanding outward, folded inward, reduced genetic diversity meant fragility, both in health and in identity. Anthropology studies reveal that such closed family systems often give rise to hereditary illnesses, weakened immune systems, and psychological strain. But beyond the biological risks was something even more haunting, the collapse of clear kinship roles. Imagine a child who calls another brother, while knowing deep down he is also his cousin, or a daughter who grows up unable to untangle whether she has one mother or two. These blurred boundaries of kinship create a family tree that looked less like a strong oak spreading outward, and more like a tangled knot slowly choking itself. Yet, the Calderóns continued generation after generation. Why? Because in their eyes, survival mattered more than the outside world's judgment. Property stayed within the family. Loyalty stayed unbroken. And for a community obsessed with honor and inheritance, that was considered victory. But at what cost? For the children born into this legacy, identity became confusion, and heritage became a curse disguised as tradition. Today, anthropologists look back at the Calderóns not simply as a family, but as a chilling case study. Their lineage forces us to ask whether legacy is truly about pure bloodlines, a concept often romanticized but biologically dangerous, or whether real legacy lies in the values, freedom, and identity we pass on to the next generation. So let me ask you this. If you had the chance to secure your family's survival for centuries, but the price was genetic fragility and identity confusion, would you take that risk or break the cycle for the sake of your children's future? The Calderón Sisters story from 1938 is not just a strange footnote in Spanish history. It is a haunting reflection of what happens when survival collides with morality. On the surface, it is about two sisters who chose, or perhaps were forced, to share one man. But beneath that surface lies something far deeper. Society's obsession with control, silence, and a desperate need to endure even the face of shame. Think about it. These were women living in a world where choices were few, where survival often outweighed personal freedom, and where silence was safer than truth. Their pact with each other was shocking, yes, but it was also a mirror of the world around them. A world that prized family honor over individuality. A world that preferred whispers to confrontation. A world where the cost of survival was written directly into the bodies and identities of the next generation. The Calderón sisters shared their blood. They shared their roof. They shared their husband. And in doing so, they created a lineage unlike any other. One both fascinating and unsettling. A family tree twisted by loyalty, secrecy, and the unbreakable bond between two women who chose to endure together rather than fall apart alone. Their story forces us to confront uncomfortable questions. Was this marriage an act of survival, an act of love, or a subtle form of control imposed by culture and circumstance? And here's where you come in. If you were in their position, facing the crushing weight of poverty, war, and tradition, what would you have done? Would you defy society and risk everything? Or would you choose silence and survival just like they did? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I want to hear your perspective. Because these stories aren't just about the past. They hold up a mirror to us today. We may not live in 1938 Asturias, but we still face choices between conformity and defiance, between silence and truth. And if you found this story chilling, remember, it's just the beginning. Subscribe, because next time we'll be peeling back the curtain on another hidden history, another dark secret that was never meant to see the light of day. History is filled with shadows, and together, we're going to explore every corner of them.